August 14, 2005. High above the ancient city of Athens, a silent drama was unfolding. In the clear blue skies, a strange and terrifying sight was taking shape, one that would soon grip an entire nation and become a chilling aviation mystery. Welcome to my channel Worldwise. Around 10,000 meters above the Greek capital, a passenger jet circled, and for 2 hours it did not answer a single radio call. Air traffic controllers tried repeatedly, but their transmissions were met with an unnerving, absolute quiet. On their radar screens, the plane was a ghost, a silent blip moving on a predetermined path with seemingly no one at the controls. Was it a hijacking? A terrorist attack? In a world still on high alert, those were the immediate fears. But the aircraft's steady, automated flight path suggested something else, something more perplexing. The truth would turn out to be far more insidious and in many ways more baffling. This is the story of Helios Airways Flight 522, the so-called ghost plane. That morning, 115 passengers and 6 crew boarded in Larnaca, Cyprus. Many were families on holiday, their destination Prague, with a stop in Athens. It was a routine flight, full of promise and expectation, one of thousands that crisscross Europe every day. The captain had more than 17,000 hours. The first officer had 7,500. On paper, an experienced crew, but reports would later suggest a tense working relationship, a clash of personalities that may have added a dangerous variable to an already complex situation. They climbed toward cruise. At altitude, something went wrong, starting with a single, baffling alarm. A loud horn blared through the cockpit, the takeoff configuration warning, an alarm that should only ever sound on the ground. To hear it in mid-air was deeply perplexing. Confusion spread as the pilots tried to diagnose a problem that made no logical sense. Minutes later, the crew reported odd lights and asked ground for help, their voices betraying their confusion. Then, as the plane continued to climb, the radio went silent. The final transmission was cut short, contact was lost. Greek fighter jets scrambled. With a silent passenger jet unresponsive over a major European capital, their mission was to intercept and identify the threat. As they drew alongside the Boeing 737, the fighter pilots prepared for the worst. What they found would become a chilling mystery. On the sun-drenched morning of August 14, 2005, Helios Flight 522 pushed back from the gate at Larnaca, Cyprus. The cabin was filled with the cheerful hum of holidaymakers, families and couples bound for Prague via Athens. For the 115 passengers and 6 crew, it was the start of a completely routine flight. On the flight deck, the captain and first officer began their climb into the clear blue sky. The aircraft climbed on autopilot, cleared for its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet. But as it passed through 12,000 feet, a loud, unexpected alarm blared through the cockpit. It was the takeoff configuration warning. An alarm that should only sound on the ground. Hearing it in mid-air was deeply perplexing. It was the first critical clue that something was wrong, but it was a symptom the pilots tragically misinterpreted. The captain radioed the Helios Operations Center, but his query was strange. He asked about the circuit breaker for the equipment cooling fan system. On the ground, an engineer realized the captain was trying to silence the alarm, not diagnose its cause. The engineer tried to steer them toward the real issue, asking directly, "Can you confirm the pressurization panel is set to auto?" The captain's reply was chilling. Ignoring the vital question, he simply repeated his query about the cooling fan. His mind, already starved of oxygen, was fixated on the wrong problem. Shortly after that last confused transmission, oxygen masks deployed throughout the cabin. These systems provide about 15 minutes of air, a bridge to get passengers through an emergency descent. But there would be no descent. On the flight deck, the pilots were already incapacitated. Moments later, all contact ceased. Nicosia Air Traffic Control called repeatedly. Their transmissions met with an unnerving silence. Helios 522 had become a ghost flight. The root of the failure lay in a single switch. The night before, an engineer performed a pressurization leak check, which required setting the system from auto to manual. The test was completed, but the final critical step was forgotten. The switch was never returned to auto. With the switch in manual, the plane's outflow valve remained open as it climbed. Instead of creating a safe, breathable cabin, the aircraft was venting its precious air into the thin atmosphere. As the plane ascended, the cabin altitude climbed with it, and the insidious effects of hypoxia began to take hold. It's a quiet cognitive failure where judgment becomes impaired and basic tasks impossible. The pilots wouldn't have realized the danger. While they succumbed, the autopilot flew on. Investigators later found this technical error was compounded by human factors. The first officer had noted issues with checklist discipline, and reports suggested a strained relationship between the pilots. This breakdown in crew resource management meant the pre-flight check failed to catch the error, allowing a simple oversight to become a catastrophe. Now silent, Helios 522 crossed into Greek airspace without clearance. Greek ATC escalated the situation, declaring a high-level security alert. This was no longer just a missing plane, it was a potential threat. Late that morning, two F-16 fighter jets from the Hellenic Air Force roared into the sky. Their mission? To intercept the silent airliner and discover what was happening inside. After nearly 2 hours of silence, Hellenic Air Force F-16S intercepted the ghost flight. When the fighters closed in, what they saw inside the cabin was a chilling scene of suspended animation.
Pilot. The captain's seat was empty. The co-pilot was slumped over the controls. In the cabin, oxygen masks were down. Passengers were motionless, masks on.
Then, a flicker of life. A man in a light blue shirt suddenly entered the cockpit.
Pilot. He sat in the captain's seat and waved at me.
For a moment there was hope, but the man was fighting a losing battle against a machine that was running out of time. Soon the left engine failed, starved of fuel. The aircraft banked into a slow turn, then the right engine went down. Now a 70-ton glider, it spiraled uncontrollably toward the mountains. At 9:03 a.m., it crashed into a hillside northwest of Athens. All 121 souls were lost. The man in the cockpit was Andreas Prodromou, a 25-year-old flight attendant who also held a commercial pilot license, though he was not certified on the 737. Investigators realized he had stayed conscious by using portable oxygen bottles, which last far longer than the 12-minute supply from passenger masks. He had used his knowledge to buy himself precious time.
CVR. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The cockpit voice recorder captured his desperate attempts to call for help, but in his hypoxic state, he forgot to press the transmit button. His pleas were recorded, but never heard. Investigators painstakingly pieced together the timeline, tracing the catastrophe back to a single switch. A pressurization test on the ground required setting the system to manual. The engineer never returned it to auto, and the flight crew missed the error on 3 separate pre-flight checklists. As the plane climbed, the cabin failed to pressurize. Soon, an alarm sounded. But a critical design flaw meant the cabin altitude warning sounded identical to the takeoff configuration chime. The crew, already suffering from cognitive decline, chased the wrong alarm, completely unaware of the real threat. At high altitude, this is the insidious nature of hypoxia. The time of useful consciousness is less than a minute. It doesn't cause panic, but a slow, quiet confusion. Decision-making evaporates and simple tasks become impossible. The pilots were incapacitated before they even understood the danger. The crash prompted immediate and sweeping changes across the industry, a tragic case study in the Swiss cheese model, where multiple small errors aligned to create disaster. Stricter standard operating procedures were implemented for pressurization checks. Boeing was mandated to create clearer, distinct alarm differentiations, ensuring such confusion could never happen again. Airlines updated training, focusing on crew resource management and recognizing the subtle signs of hypoxia, ensuring crews could interpret alarms and follow checklists even under extreme pressure. Today, the victims are remembered at a memorial near the crash site. The industry is safer because of the painful lessons learned from their loss. What began with a forgotten switch cost 121 lives. A stark reminder of how a single small error can cascade through multiple layers of safety to become a catastrophe. It is a story of system failures, but also of the incredible bravery of one man who fought until the very end. This is the story of Flight 522. My next video watching now.